Round start.
Fantastic! Unbelievable!
Hello everybody, and welcome to the very first video on my channel, Catastrophe Books, where I talk about anything writing related, whether it's movies, TV shows, books themselves, video games, whatever, just anything that interests us in what is a good story. The little details, the big details, analyses, dissections, all of that. So what I want to talk about is Arcane. I finally watched it. Amazing show. Watch it if you want to watch it. But I feel like there's a little detail that other people who have covered the show haven't really taken note of. It's nothing bad. It's just a small detail that I feel like is pretty major to the story. Now, the story of Arcane is one of progress and the consequences of progress, how some will exceed and most will get left behind, as shown with the oppression that happens to the people who live in the Undercity, what is going to be known as zaun, per the last decision made by the council at the end of season 1. They are now going to be called the independent state or city of Zaun, separate from Piltover. But before that, it was all Piltover. It was like a different district of Piltover. That's all, just the slums of Piltover. Now, something I want to talk about is the weaponry. Obviously, there is a form of like classism, and maybe you could even say racism, because now there's going to be like the race of Zaunites, you could say. But there was like a form of classism or racism in which the Piltovans obviously were the oppressors. They were the ones who were high and mighty. They had privilege, they had wealth, they had clean air to breathe. Now that's a big thing, clean air to breathe. People in Zaun, or in the Undercity as it's called in season 1, in the lanes, they have none of those. As Vice says in the beginning of the first episode, she rhetorically questions, do you think people topside are going hungry? To which the obvious answer to that is no, as we see cupcakes and sandwiches just left outside randomly everywhere. And those were obviously things that these starving kids, Vi's siblings, adopted siblings, Vi's family, things that they would have treasured. They even treasure that over the gadgets that they find in Jayce's apartment, as we see Powder immediately go for the sandwich instead of like all the golden trinkets that are like strewn about in Jayce's room. By the way, Jayce plays guitar. I don't know if anyone noticed that, but there's a guitar in Jayce's bedroom and Jayce plays guitar. So I think that's something interesting. It's like the typical college dorm room, just like a guitar there, you know? Anyways, back to my topic on the weapons. There is a large diversity of weapons within Arcane's story. We've got like the iconic Vander's like cast iron gauntlets, I want to call them, or cast iron like punching gloves that he has, in which he used infamously during the revolution, the civil war that happened between the Undercity and Piltover, which ultimately orphaned Vi and Powder because Vander led Vi and Powder's parents to their death. We have those strange, almost like bolos, like bolo, boomerang, pokeball things from the Enforcers. The Enforcers also have guns, which is interesting, very interesting to note, because if anyone's noticed this at all, it's that despite all of the violence that happens in the Undercity, the violence that gets ignored by Piltover that happens in the Undercity, you'll notice that not a lot of Undercity people, I'm just going to call them Zaunites for ease of use, not a lot of Zaunites had guns, which the only Zaunite having a gun being Jinx, who had to make those guns, those grenades, those bombs herself. Everyone else had, whether it's like a chemtech related weapon that enhanced your speed or strength, or a knife, a blade, Even Silco, who's supposed to be like the big crime boss of the Undercity, he isn't really seen that much with a gun. In fact, when he's about to presumably attack Powder, his weapon of choice was a knife. He was going to stab and gut her until she obviously hugged him and won him over through resonating with his own pain, his own trauma with betrayal. They formed a bond over that. But I feel like that's just a big not story point. It's like a big detail to show the differences in Zaun and Piltover, the oppression in Zaun and Piltover, and how a Zaunite or Piltovan would think when it comes to conflict. Obviously, when there is conflict within the Undercity, within the lanes, it's very personal, it's very brutal, it's very messy, it's very close. Vi is a boxer. Vi is a boxer, right? She punches, she kicks. Someone like Derek, he has a knife on him, he stabs. Even like Savika, she ultimately punches and kicks. That's what violence in Zaun looks like. Piltover treats violence at a distance. They always do. Violence is beneath them. Violence should be far away, and that's why Piltovans preferably use guns, to the point where they even use guns in sport, as shown with Caitlyn training with Grayson, or competing with Grayson in like a shooting competition. The young people, they just, in Piltover, apparently they just like have guns strewn about. They use it for sports, they use it for protection, they use it for oppression. And one of the ways to use guns for oppression is not just to point it and aim it at those who you fear or those who you find beneath you, but it's also to make sure that the people you're oppressing don't have guns as well, which I think is really interesting. Were the Piltovans preventing Zaunites from using guns? Because it didn't really make that much sense to me that, okay, we have this dystopia full of drugs and poverty, desperation, and none of them have a game-changing weapon that is a gun. Can you imagine all the problems that could have been, quote unquote, I'm saying quote unquote because they don't actually solve problems, but quote unquote solved in Zaun if someone just had a gun, right? If someone just had a gun, if Bruno, for example, had a gun when Silco came out, Bruno could have just shot the Chemtech ridden Derek, right? He could have just shot Derek. I mean, who knows how effective that would have been, but it would have been way more effective than walking up with just a knife or a cleaver in hand. Similarly, imagine if Vi herself just had a gun. I know that the whole boxing imagery, the punching mentality speaks to Vi's character, but just imagine for a second if she had a gun on that narrow catwalk that everyone was charging at her with instead of just her fists. She could have mowed everyone down and protected her brother Clagor, her brother Milo, and Vander from a distance. It's just really weird. So I feel like, and of course this is just a theory, I don't know if it's confirmed or not, I feel like guns obviously were being used as a symbolism of oppression, and it's obvious that the people with guns are the oppressors, the people without the guns are the oppressed. And of course, again, it reflects the mentality of Piltovans who keep violence at a distance. They don't want, well, not that they don't want, but it's just that they are not accustomed to violence. It is at a distance. It is far away. They turned a blind eye to it, as some people might do when aiming down the sights of a gun. They would close one of their eyes. The Zaunites violence is very integral in their life from very young ages to very old ages. Violence is all around you. Violence is never at a distance. It is always personal. It's always in your face. And that's why they have so many in-your-face weapons. Echo, for example, uses like some type of pipe or a baton. Again, a lot of Silco's gang members charge Vi with what is essentially melee weapons, blades and knives. Again, Vander's cast iron boxing glove. And of course, their style of fighting is obviously different. Whenever a Zaunite seems to get close enough to a Piltover, a Zaunite will always win in battle, as shown with Vander beating the absolute might out of one of the Piltover oppressors on the bridge, or when Vi is fighting, of course, that she makes it pretty obvious. Similarly, when we see, and I know that they are enhanced with Chemtech, but the fact that if they close that gap thanks to the Chemtech, then the Piltovers don't really have that much of a defense against a Zaunite. During the battle when Jayce attacks one of Silco's shimmer factories, right? We see the people wearing what I assume is the chem tanks that's from the League of Legends game that enhances speed and strength and like defense. We see them close the gap with those chem tanks, and after they close the gap, the Piltovers kind of just shut down. They don't know what to do, right? They don't seem to have any hand-to-hand experience. They don't know how to dodge a punch, it seems. They don't seem to know how to dodge a punch coming at their face. They just kind of stand there like a deer in headlights and they take it. Because again, violence for Piltover is supposed to be at a distance. It's supposed to be in zaun. It's supposed to be in a place where they don't want to remember, where they don't want to think about. They are a very sheltered people, sheltered by their privilege and by their power. And I think that's also why Kate is such an interesting character, as she represents that sort of sheltering in Piltover, juxtaposed by Vi's raw openness with her emotions and her attitude, which comes from zaun. And I think that's why they make that's why they're shipped so hard, and that's why they kind of make like an ultimate dynamic duo, an ultimate couple, because like their differences really work off of each other. It complements each other. Someone who's very personal and very in your face versus someone who's very reserved and keeps her distance. But yeah, anyways, I thought it was very interesting, the differences in weaponry between the Zaunites and the Piltovers, and I think that also speaks to why Jinx or Powder is something like an outcast or a misfit, because she's a marksman, and within zaun, for some reason, her skill as a marksman, even as a child playing that arcade game, is not recognized as a type of strength. She views strength more of the fist fighting value like her sisters and brothers can do. That is strength in her mind. That is strength to a Zaunite. But Jinx's strength lies in her marksmanship, in her innovation. Someone who keeps things at a distance, who shoots things really, really, really good. Like the fact that this girl, however old she is, probably like early 20s or at least late teens, the fact that she made her own minigun is just, that's incredible power that she has if you think about it. But she has this inferiority complex because the fact that she can make a minigun is not viewed as strength in Zaunite culture, because it keeps the violence at a distance, which is odd. It's odd for a Zaunite to keep violence at a distance. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was somewhat thought-provoking. I know Arcane is, I guess the hype for it is sort of over. I know I watched it late. I didn't want to have other people's influences in my head saying, oh, this is good, watch it, in my head while I watched it, because then I couldn't really make an accurate, non-biased decision on the show. So I'm glad I waited until I forgot everyone's opinions on the show before I watched it, because then it made it all the more better for me when I watched it. And God, it's great. So if you enjoyed this, if you at least had a thought-provoking, if you have any thoughts, leave them down in the comments. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. I will see you guys the next time I do something like this. Bye-bye.